Welcome to Guiding Parents in the Age of Overindulgence. I am Ellie McCann, and I am an Extension Educator in the Center for Family Development. And I am joined today by Jean Ilse Clark.
Hi, it's great to be here.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm part of the research team working on the impact of childhood overindulgence on adult lives. This has been an amazing experience because we've had so many surprises. You'll learn about some of the surprises today, and I hope you'll approach them with gusto and make sense of them in your own lives.
So a little bit about our hour together today. We are going to learn about the overindulgence research that Jean just referred to. We're going to give an overview of parenting in the age of overindulgence, which is an online course for parents. And we're going to begin to explore tools for parents who are encountering overindulgence. Today's webinar is being recorded for future viewing. If you have questions on any of the content during the webinar, please type that into the Q&A panel at the bottom. If you have technical difficulties today, please feel free to chat with one of the hosts. We also have others in the room with Jean and I today. Young Mao and Hannah Jastrom are working with our technology pieces and questions. They'll be helping us along the way. And Lisa Kraus is also in the room, who is part of our overindulgence team. We have a question that we would like you to respond to begin our webinar. In your experience, does overindulgence come up seldom, sometimes, or frequently? If you could put your response in the polling panel, that would be great. 39% correct, say sometimes. 33% say frequently. And 0 say seldom. How about that?
No, it's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
And we're learning to recognize it.
So what is the research behind parenting in the age of overindulgence? Since 1996, Jean Ilse Clark, Connie Dawson, and David Bredehoff have collaborated together on overindulgence research. They have completed 10 research studies with over 3,500 research participants that have really provided a lot of insight into childhood overindulgence and the subsequent effects on adults. They have co-authored and revised this research into practical implications and potential applications in the book, How Much is Too Much? Raising Likable, Responsible, Respectful Children from Toddlers to Teens in an Age of Overindulgence. So what is overindulgence? Overindulging children is really giving them too much of what looks good too soon and for too long. It's giving them things or experiences that are really not appropriate for their ages, their interests, and their talents. It's the process of giving things to children to meet the adult needs, not the child's. Overindulgence is giving a disproportionate amount of family resources to one or more children in a way that appears to be meeting the children's needs, but it does not. So children experience scarcity in the midst of plenty. Overindulgence is doing or having so much of something that it does active harm, or at least prevents a person from developing and deprives that person of achieving his or her full potential. Overindulgence is also a form of child neglect. It hinders children from performing their developmental tasks, and from learning necessary life lessons.
So how did we get all that dreadful information? Well, we got it from adults who had been overindulged as children. We did a long series of in-depth interviews. And at the time that I started those, people weren't talking about overindulgence. So the interviewees wanted to talk with me a long, long time. All of them said at the end of the interview, "You are the first person who has ever listened." I want to give the definition now.
All right.
At the end of an interview, I would say, "What is the definition of overindulgence?" and they would tell me something, and then they would point a finger at my head or at my heart and say, you include that. Okay. So we have a really long definition. This is the one that's in the book, How Much is Too Much. Overindulging children is giving them too much of what looks good too soon and for too long. It is giving them things or experience that are not appropriate for their age or their interests and talents. It's the process of giving things to children to meet the adult's needs, not the child's. And I'll talk a little more about that because that's really surprising. Overindulgence is giving a disproportionate amount of family resources to one or more children in a way that appears to be meeting the children's needs, but does not. Another surprise. So children experience scarcity in the midst of plenty. One of them said to me with real longing in his eyes, they gave me things and I wanted them. Overindulgence is doing or having so much of something that it does active harm, or at least prevents a person from developing and deprives a person of achieving his or her full potential. It's a form of child neglect. Now, Ellie went through those things, and I gave you that complete definition. That's too long for me to carry around in my mouth. So my short definition is, it's giving too much, too soon, or too long, anything that gets in the way of a child's development. Let me whisk through the research, and then we'll look at some of the impacts of it. We've completed 10 studies, of which I'm very proud. And each study has from 3 to 6 major conclusions. I'm going to pull one conclusion out of each one, and perhaps that will give you an idea of something you would like to pursue further. And you can find more information about all of these, the Overindulgence website, overindulgence.info. We'll give you that again at the end. So let's say that Joe has got really involved in looking at study 1. And there were 6 big results in that, but the one that he really focused on is that overindulgence is complex. And beside too many things, it involves soft structure and over-nurture. I like to think of too many things as here, have some more. I like to think of soft structure as no rules, no chores. And that's what people told us they resented. And I like to think of over-nurture as, let me do that for you, honey. Or, I've already done that for you. That is also highly resented. Let's say that Nancy looked at study 2, which looks, among other things, at dysfunctional life attitudes, and found that it contributes to adolescent and young adulthood dysfunctional thinking. Certainly not what we intend when we give too much. Let's say that Sarah looked at study 3, which moved from looking at kids and youth to looking at adults, particularly parents, and found that the more highly someone was overindulged as a child, the more apt they were to say about their own parenting, my child controls my life, I have little control over my child, and appallingly, neither my child nor myself is responsible for his or her behavior. And I spend some time thinking about children raised by parents who have those beliefs and how those children are going to act in the workplace if they don't get this corrected in between. Let's say that Jose looked at studies 4 and 8, and those 2 studies go together because they are about parenting styles, Baumrinn's authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. And when we did study 4, mostly women responded. So later on, we did study 8, which used exactly the same study but was only for dads, and found that we thought that permissive parenting, it's okay, honey, do whatever you like, would have the most overindulging parents. I thought that was the only one. And what the research showed us was that authoritarian parents, or my way or the highway parents, also tended to overindulge. And as I thought about that, I thought, we all want good things for our children. This comes from a good heart. So if I've been being really authoritarian and rigid, I may have moments when I think, maybe I did too much of that. I'll make it up by getting the kids a new boat or some such. Let's say that Jane looked at study 5, which is about adult relationships. And out of the 7 big findings of that, she chose to think about the fact that people who are overindulged as children tend to choose a partner who will overindulge them. And as I thought about it, I thought, well, that makes sense. Because when we look for a partner, we look for somebody who feels familiar. And if I was highly overindulged as a child, and I meet a potential partner who was also highly overindulged, we're going to have a lot in common. This is going to feel really familiar. So when I thought more about this, I think it's not so surprising. My most unfavorite study is study 6, and Gail looked at that. And I had some consternation in the middle of the interpretations of this study, because this study is about how I view myself and plan to focus my life. And the more people were overindulged, the more they said that their focus, their goals in life were wealth, fame, and image. So I was talking with Dave Bredehoff about it, and I said, I don't think wealth is bad. I wish everybody had enough. And I don't think fame is bad if somebody really wants to be famous. Let them be. Maybe Paris Hilton carried it a little bit far, but not so bad. And image is to have people comment on how attractive and stylish they are. I like to look at people who look well-dressed. And so I thought, well, those aren't so bad. And Dave said, wait a minute. The rest of the study says, what are your least important aspirations? And this is the one that just grinds me into the ground. Don't care about creating meaningful relationships, a loving connection with someone. Don't care about personal growth, learning new things and having a meaningful life. Do not care about community contributions, not willing to work for the betterment of the community, not willing to do something good for another person unless it directly benefits them. And when I think about having a person like this on my team in the workplace or on my committee in some organization, I just cringe. Then when Carol looked at study 7, she found that is a retest in which we have done a reliability study, and we now have 14 items that can measure the amount of childhood overindulgence that a person has experienced. And this has helped us no end in our research because overindulgence is on a continuum. There are people who had almost none, and people who had some, and people who had a whole lot. And then we compare the two ends as to the differences. And so it's very helpful to have this 14-item measure. Tracy looked at study 8, and that is a very broad study. One of the things that it included is ability to delay gratification, and found that overindulgence follows with an inability to delay gratification. I want it, and I want it now. And that in children, we notice unappreciativeness and ungratefulness, or it's easier to say lack of appreciation and lack of being grateful. And that occurs also in the adults. Brenda looked at study 9, and this is the one that's a repeat of study 4. And in this one, we found the same impact in adult life. But one change that we found within the studies, and that is that in the beginning study, in study 1, which was done in 2007, mothers were indulging more than fathers. And in 2013, when we did study 9, fathers were indulging more than mothers. But mothers, don't lean back on your laurels because they weren't indulging a whole lot more. The mothers were still having at it.
And that's a study that we include in our Parents Forever curriculum.
Right.
Along with our parenting styles.
Right.
So parents can really look at where am I at in my style and how might that be affecting if I'm overindulging.
Right. And then Sandy looked at study 10. There are 5 big findings in that. And the one that stopped her, this was a study where we look at, is overindulgence really the same thing as helicopter parenting? And we found that children who were overindulged were mainly parented by helicopter parents, but not exclusively. You can overindulge without hovering. The one that really Sandy focused on is that adults who were overindulged, highly overindulged in childhood, feel they are entitled to more of everything than they deserve, and that they deserve more than other people. So there's no equity in that. So of course I get more. And also, we had another study in there on spiritual involvement and found that the more people were overindulged, the less interested they were in spiritual growth. So it gives you a quick overview. There is more on the website, overindulgence.info. And you only got one finding out of each study. So what's the impact? It's painful to the child and the people around them. Ellie, alternate these with me.
Well, children may like being overindulged at times, but overindulgence can be also very painful to themselves and to the people around them.
Overindulgence is more than spoiling. We think of spoiled children, they just break boundaries and are demanding and interrupt and so on and so forth. But some overindulged children have very good social manners because that's been the bargain. You create good manners, you make me look good, and I'll buy you whatever you like.
Right. Overindulged children often become then, along with that, very demanding and unappreciative.
Children who are overindulged with lessons, music, sports, dance, etc., may have admirable performance skills, but lack everyday life skills. I'm thinking about a girl I hired to do some work for me, a girl who's a beautiful athlete. And she was 17 and she had never had a vacuum cleaner in her hands.
Also, people who were overindulged as children suffer later in life when they run into situations where their overblown sense of entitlement is resented and when they lack skills other people take for granted. And I think that is one of those pieces that can show in an office environment or in a workplace environment as adults, as people that we just tend to not really enjoy working with.
Right.
So
we'll give you the rest of the bad news really quickly,
okay,
because we got a lot of good news. What did people say in the study that was very open-ended and where people gave us their own words, not just checking items? I feel sad and angry when I don't get my way or don't get what I want.
I often feel disappointed in others. I feel let down by them. Again, the more I give, the more I expect back.
I'm so far in debt, I can't see the light of day. I'm overweight, and I'm too tired.
I am discontented, overweight, enjoy cocktails, overcook and overfeed children or guests, or don't feed them at all.
Yeah.
don't set enough reasonable limits, have trouble budgeting time and money.
And one person said, I'm fat and I still feel empty. So we've distilled 7 hazards of overindulgence. Trouble, learning to delay gratification. Trouble, Ellie?
Giving up status as a constant center of attention.
Attention. Trouble, becoming competent in everyday skills, self-care, and relating to others.
Trouble, taking personal responsibility.
Trouble developing a sense of personal identity.
Trouble knowing what is enough.
Trouble knowing what is normal for other people. Since this is so grim, why is it that parents overindulge? Well, the first thing we hear is people have too much money, or people want to give their children things that they didn't have. But what we found out in the studies is that overindulgence can happen at any income level, and we identified 41 reasons. So I think that the reason I overindulge as a parent is my reason. It's idiosyncratic to me that we don't have, okay, these are the 3 reasons people overindulge, don't do that. I think it's very much part of a person's unmet needs, probably part of the family system.
Mm-hmm.
It's one reason it's complex. But always to remember, as Ellie goes on with the games parents play, that when we started the research, I thought I wouldn't like parents who overindulge because I thought they were mean. And then, of course, I found out I was doing it, which was not what I intended. And we're now sure that it comes from a good heart, but that we haven't had the ability to see it and the tools to counter it.
Right. And I think sometimes, as we talk about in the Parents Forever curriculum, this can also happen between parents who are co-parenting in a variety of different ways that they can play games, and it tends to be a lose situation for the child, of course. Some of the different ways is either being the merry mom or the Disneyland dad, turning kids into adults, which is also called parentification, playing hostage, either preventing the child's possessions to go to the other parent's home or preventing the child from going to the other parent's home. I Spy and the Secret Keeper is asking that child to spy on the other parent and then come back and report, or keeping secrets from the other parent. Being a messenger, and this we know is putting that child in the middle to deliver information, whether it's positive or negative information. That is a lot for a child to carry. And put downs, when we as a parent put down the other parent, we know how much that can hurt a child because that child is part of both of their parents and has that identity.
Right. Another one that I think about is parents demanding loyalty.
Oh, absolutely.
You must be more loyal to me than to the other parent.
Mm-hmm. And grandparents, as we know, and you have talked about some, can also overindulge.
Well, yes, unfortunately.
I can't wait to be a grandma, but boy, I'm going to have to watch that.
Oh, there are some chapters in the book, in the How Much book, about that.
So, as Jean said earlier, this can all really come from such a good, loving heart, because parents give in or give too much because they want their children to be happy, or sometimes it's just to get through the day.
Yes, and another reason is simply not knowing child development. I was talking with a high school student who is pretty with it, and she was lamenting that her sister-in-law is trying to scrounge up enough money to buy a laptop for the nephew who is 1 year old.
And you know what? I was hoping you were going to say was college bound.
Yeah, right. And the high school student said, "Why are you doing that?" And the mother said, "I have to. All the mothers are doing it."
Goodness.
Well, if you don't understand that screen time is not good for the brain, and you care about your child, you have that good heart, it can catch you. So in the How Much is Enough book, which is a revision of How Much, in the How Much is Too Much book, which is a revision of How Much is Enough, there are new chapters on grandparenting and on overindulgence. There is much more explanation about the research and how to apply what to do about it, and 7 whole new chapters. It's published by the Capital, and it's available in bookstores everywhere. And it's also not a bad read. So here's the website, Overindulgence. Oh, that's not right. It's overindulgence.info. .com is not right. It's www.overindulgence.info.
I'm so glad you got that.
Yeah, me too.
Parenting in the Age of Overindulgence, our online course, presents evidence-based research for both parents and professionals in a technology-based format. This online course was developed by a multidisciplinary team of extension educators within the Center for Family Development, along with Jean and all of her research and knowledge that she brings to the team. The course provides practical kinds of parenting tools and relatable situations to parents and influential adults, and it's also a useful tool for professionals who may be working with families. The goal of this team was to increase parents' self-awareness and to promote self-efficacy to make changes to reduce overindulgence in their parenting. As I said, it has also been very helpful for professionals who work with children and families. So a little bit about this course and how it is organized. It begins first by learning what is overindulgence. We've gone over some of that today, but it'll take you in kind of that same direction. Next, it covers the 3 types of overindulgence that can occur. There are then tools for parents to use to identify overindulgence. And the course concludes by taking you through some different family scenarios. There are 3 different topics that use 3 different age ranges. So as Jean discussed, based on her research and her team on overindulgence, we now know that there are 3 different types of overindulgence. The first type is too much. This is where parents not really don't understand the concept of what is enough.
All of my friends have one.
So my 1-year-old needs a computer.
If you really loved me, you'd give it to me.
Okay, honey. Also, over-nurturing. Parents over-nurture by overdoing, spoiling, giving too much attention, doing things for children that they can either do for themselves already or should be learning to do for themselves.
Oh, honey, you look tired. I'll do it for you.
Yes, you just go right ahead and go to bed.
Yeah.
I'll meet you in there in a while. And allowing children to think only about themselves and not about others. Soft structure is when parents do not have rules or don't insist that rules be followed, or when parents shield them from consequences of their behaviors and don't insist that they learn life skills, or when parents fail to insist that children consider the impact of their actions on the family, the group they're in, or the larger society.
One of the things that helps children do all of those things is chores. And not having chores, not having done chores, means that children go into adulthood without that basic template of what is the job, do I know how to do it, finish it, and put your gear away.
My 23-year-old last week was laughing with me about her chore of washing grapes and separating from the stems when she was 3 years old, when we would get home from the grocery store.
Oh.
And I said, but that was your job. And she said, and I felt so important, Mom.
You bet.
So this is our chart that we discussed a little bit earlier. According to Baumrein, there are 4 parenting styles, and we have included these in the Parents Forever curriculum. Authoritative parents are demanding but responsive, and they show affection. If you use this parenting style, you tend to monitor your children, you set clear standards for them, you're assertive but not intrusive and restrictive, and you use discipline in a more supportive way versus a punishing type of manner. Autocratic parents, which are also known as authoritarian, are demanding but not responsive. And if you use this parenting style, you're a firm believer in rules and you have very high expectations of behavior. You show love by expecting the best from your children, but rarely show affection. Communication with this kind of parenting is often one way from the parent to the child. So sometimes it can be overly rigid and harsh in how the parent corrects negative behaviors.
And one of the things that happens there is while the parent may look mean, often they do this because they're scared. The children are going into a very strange world, one that they don't know. And so the rules can get more important than what they can learn by listening to the child.
And I think what happens then is they get a lot of short-term quick fixes versus long-term development. Permissive parents are responsive but not demanding. If you approach parenting with this style, you show your child a lot of love, you give them what they ask for, communicate openly, and let them do what they want most of the time. You have trouble setting and enforcing rules. You prefer to be friendly rather than a disciplinarian. And sometimes you feel like your children have the upper hand.
And the reason you feel that way is that they do.
Yes, they do.
So they run the family.
These are the children. I taught preschool for over 20 years. And if I ever said, who's in charge at your house? These children said, me.
Yeah.
And they were.
Yep.
Unengaged parents are neither demanding nor responsive. If you approach parenting with this parenting style, you may feel uncomfortable about parenting. And this may be because you don't spend much time with your children, or because you're focused more on work or other interests. When you are with your children in this style of parenting, you tend to be preoccupied and not focused on them. So, which parenting style do you think lends itself to overindulgence? How about if our participants type their answer into the chat box and send it to the panelists? Which parenting style do you think lends itself to overindulgence? Well, I think, as most of you might think, and I might as well, permissive did come through in the research as being one of the top, but it makes sense that authoritarian parents would also overindulge, as Jean has pointed out earlier.
But someone said it could occur in all of them. And although our research didn't show us any in authoritative parenting, that balanced parenting, it could easily happen just through lack of knowledge. So I think that's a very good answer to think about. No matter where we are or where we go, we can be subject to falling into the trap.
Right. We're going to now walk through a few tools that can be used to support parents to help them avoid overindulgence. The first tool is called the Test of 4, and this is a tool that helps parents and children learn about what is enough. It guides adults and children towards personal responsibility and self-control. It encourages clear thinking and good decision-making. The 4 points here that are included in the Test of 4, number 1 is development. Does it get in the way of the child learning a developmental task? And if so, which ones? The second point are resources. Does it use a disproportionate amount of family resources, money, space, time, energy, focus of one or more of the children? The third is whose needs are being met. Is this more for the parent than for the child? Fourth is possible harm. Does it deplete or in some way harm others, property, the environment, and or the community? Let's run through a scenario, Jean, that may include overindulgence, and we'll walk through the Test of 4.
Okay.
This example is around co-parenting. So I am a single parent and have my 2 children during the weekdays, okay? The other parent has them on the weekends and gives them pretty much anything they want and takes them to elaborate and expensive events.
Mm-hmm.
I can't afford those kinds of things, so when they are with me, I really try to make up for it by giving them a lot of freedom during the week. So I'm trying to figure out, is this really overindulgence?
Well, these are 2 examples, so let's take one. The party parent?
I think so. Does the party parent and those actions get in the way of the child's learning a developmental task? How about if we have our participants put a yes or no in the chat box? If you want to type in why you think it does get in the way of learning a developmental task, that would be our next part of the first.
One reason might be the child not having time to figure out how to entertain themselves. That entertainment always has to be handed to me and come from the outside. But also, if it's party every weekend, it means that other things that the child would have been learning that weekend or doing chores are just eliminated.
Right. So they don't have that sense of routine.
I think it might. Yes, definitely it might.
Okay. The second is resources. Does it use a disproportionate amount of family resources, such as money, space, time, energy, focus of one or more of the children? So do we know the answer? Participants, if you'll type in a yes or a no. And if you want to put in what type of resources that it may use too much of, you can type that in as well. So it sounds like it's using up a lot.
Right. And I really like this question because it's so good for me when I look at is this act that I want to do or this thing that I want to get overindulging? Because really only the people within the family know about this one.
Mm-hmm.
We can't use this one by and large to judge anybody else.
Right.
This test of 4 gives us some clues, but we really have to do it, as my co-author Connie Dawson would say, scrupulously within ourselves.
So the next is whose needs are being met. How about if you type in either parent or child here? Oh, there's parent.
Well, let's talk about that need
Yeah.
for a minute. If I am the party parent, what is the need that I'm fulfilling for myself?
The need to keep my children busy.
Might be just to keep them busy.
And could it be because I'm not sure what else to do with
Might not
the time?
know what else to do. What else?
To keep the kids happy.
Keep the
Someone
kids
is saying.
happy. Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to make yourself feel better about the situation.
Yep. Maybe even trying to be the favorite parent.
Mm-hmm.
Many reasons. Many reasons.
Absolutely.
But party every weekend would be very hard for us to say that's what the child needs.
Mm-hmm.
Because the child needs so many things that excludes.
Right. So the last is possible harm. Does it deplete or in some way harm others, property, the environment, or the community? Yes or no, please type in your thoughts.
Brenda says, yes, that life is all about fun and getting things.
Well, that's a nice way to put it. But this question is about not does it harm the child. This question is about does it harm other people or property or something in the environment. Harder, huh?
Mm-hmm. And someone said it depends on what they're doing.
Right-o.
Very true. Yep.
Depends on what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Out of this test of 4,
Mm-hmm.
we got a might on the first question. It might interfere with developmental tasks. That we can't really know about the family resources. We got the parents' needs are being met.
Mm-hmm.
That's a yes.
Mm-hmm.
And possible harm, possibly a yes, depending on what they're doing.
Right.
So the way we look at this is, if there's a strong yes to any of the 4, then that means it's time to really look at what we're doing. Some parents are starting to teach this to their children, older children.
What a wonderful way to discuss it together
And
problem solve together.
So far, on very few count.
Mm-hmm.
10, 11, and 12-year-olds are better at it than teenagers.
So the next tool is the Developmental Parenting Highway. And this helps us see where overindulgence fits with other ways of parenting. So if a parent can focus on staying in the middle of the road, it will help them avoid or come back from overindulgence if they veer off way over to the right or veer off to the left. This is also mentioned and discussed in our current online course and will be included in more depth in our next online course. And there's also a downloadable fact sheet with more detailed information on the Parenting Highway as part of the course. Suggestion circles are the third way to gain really some tried and true parenting solutions, often from other parents who tend to have the best wisdom. It's important to try out several ideas when you're trying to avoid overindulgence and not just one suggestion. You can ask a group of about 6 people, of family or friends, for their most helpful ideas for solving your problem. Be sure to remember that no violence or put-downs are allowed as part of this. And do not let others expand on anyone else's ideas. Simply say thank you to each idea. Then think, choose, and use an idea. If you want to discuss any idea more in depth, you can do so at a later time.
And one thing that often happens is when you get those options, you start thinking and come up with something even better.
Right. Suggestion circles can also be done on the phone or video chat. Find 6 friends to connect with. on email, Facebook, or discussion boards. Once again, find 6 friends or family members to connect with using one of these methods. You can also use them at work or in your community. Ask 6 service people or coworkers. Oftentimes these can be the greatest suggestion circles, which really are another parenting tool to use to help us stay away from overindulging.
And just a general stay away from it is, if you think you're overindulging, you've used the test of 4, you have that sticky feeling. Instead of just feeling guilty about it or beating on yourself, don't do that. Just do less tomorrow. Less overindulging tomorrow. It's here. We're all doing it. Tomorrow, do less.
One day at a time.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. So what we'd like to do is ask you the same polling question at this point. So in your experience, does overindulgence come up seldom, sometimes, or frequently? All right, Jean. We have sometimes at 19%, frequently at 32%. So it stayed pretty close to the same as our earlier poll.
Oh, isn't that gratifying? That means people know a lot more about it than they used to.
They do.
Because when I first started doing this, people would say at the end of a workshop or a lesson, oh, I had no idea. So now we have an idea.
That's great.
And we can go about countering it.
So we want to thank you for being with us today. And remember that everybody overindulges. So let's all help each other resist doing it.
Thank you so much for being with us.